Hey, today in this episode of the Everyday Leader podcast, we are excited to bring to you Anika Jackson. She's going to share her multifaceted journey about being a leader and balancing the roles of being a mother, an educator, as well as her leadership roles in nonprofits. And really, she dives into discussing the importance of being authentic, being transparent, and having alignment in leadership. We're super excited to bring her wisdom and experience to you today.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to today's episode of the Everyday Leader Podcast. We're super excited to have Anika Jackson with us today. She's a multi-talented professional and has experience in marketing, branding, public relations, and podcasting. She's a graduate professor at USC, and has a podcast called Your Brand Amplified. She's also involved in philanthropy and you'll have to talk more about the nonprofit in a second because you said some things changed there. And she's awesome, and we're excited to talk with her today about her journey and her views on leadership. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, for our listener, I guess maybe tell us anything I missed or anything else they ought to know about you.
Well, first and foremost, I am a mom, and that is the most important thing that I will ever do. That is the most important job I will ever have, and my daughter is my number one. So making sure that she's a really good human. I do feel that when we're born, we already are pretty fully formed as to who we are. And I definitely see that in her personality, who she is. And so our job as parents is just to make sure they stay on the right path, that they hopefully gain some wisdom along the way. You know, of course, everybody wants to make their own mistakes. I definitely had to learn from doing, not from being told when I was growing up. But she is the light of my life. And everything I do has to revolve around, getting her off. She's a junior. She's known what she wants to do since she was 12. So just helping her, nurture her, and get her off to college and launch and continue to support her. So that's my number one above anything else I do. What's that?
I said I should have led with that.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. So everything I do has to revolve around, being there for her. So I was a stay-at-home mom for a very long time, and then unfortunately got divorced and had to go back to work. So I've been on both sides of the coin. And so when I've worked for other people, I've had an issue sometimes where they have to understand I'm a mom first, and I'm going to be there to pick her up, to take her to her activities. And to me, that is part of my leadership journey, right? I want to lead by example. I want to work with people who have the same values and who also understand that. And now I do a number of things that are flexible. And then I also, that are entrepreneurship stuff. I also teach. I also go to school, and I also work for a nonprofit foundation where everybody's a parent. Almost from the people I work with on the school side, because we have an online private school, they all want to be there for their kids. They all understand it. And so it's really beautiful to be in a place like that and to know that others are leading by example as well. So then it makes my job easier.
Yeah, can you kind of elaborate on some of your experiences with that? Because I think that's a really common issue that moms have, is navigating leadership in the workforce, and maybe some insight for leaders that are dealing with moms and how to lead them effectively. And
Yeah. Gosh. I've had a really interesting path where, going back a little bit, a lot of my leadership was developed through nonprofit world. When I was a stay-at-home mom and I had time to give back to my community and really train in that work, which I say are really transferable skills to any job, right? Learning how to lead a team, communicate effectively, learn about budgets, programming, and then running programs at her school, and then with other nonprofits. So when I went back to the world of work, I was fortunate to get a job, but I did have a boss who was not a parent. And it did make it difficult. And I was that parent where sometimes my daughter was the last one being picked up at school. And that was heartbreaking because that wasn't how I wanted to show up for her. And I know that a lot of parents have to go through that, and that is just their day-to-day experience. But for me, that isn't what I wanted to give to her. And so then when that was when we were in Houston still, because I've lived a few different places. We moved back to Los Angeles area in 2019, and I had a very hard time finding a job. I've done a lot of different things in my career. I'm not a specialist in one specific area. So it took a great while for me to get a job. And it wasn't until I went out, I'd been back in LA maybe 6 months, 7 months, and I just looked at the full moon and I just said, okay, it's in your hands. I've done everything I can. I've applied for every job possible. I feel like I've done all the work. I'm perfectly happy to come back and try to get a job at a grocery store or something else, but it's in your hands. And then a few days later, I got a phone call asking me to start working as a consultant for somebody for PR. And then from there, I ended up starting an agency. And then from there, I got offered teaching opportunities at the university level, which I never thought was open to me, and all these other things that play really well into my life being a mom and a parent. And I know this isn't directly answering, but I promise I'll get back there. So what I think is really important is that we all have our own journeys and we all will do what it takes, right? So I think the day of 9 to 5 is long gone. I want to be able to drop my daughter off at school, come do some emails, work, go pick her up, take her to an activity, and then get back on my laptop if I need to, or answer emails or get on a call or whatever I need to do. But it's not a linear day. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. So I have been lucky enough in this time since I've been back to LA to also be vice president at 2 different marketing agencies. One of them was a little more flexible. The other one, again, situation was working for somebody who was never married, didn't have children, did not really understand or comprehend that my daughter was always going to be number one. And that particular leader in the company said to me, oh, when she goes off to college, you're going to be a dynamo. You're going to be number one in sales and you're going to do all these great things. And I was like, yeah, but when she's off in university, I'm going to visit her. Like, we're still going to have this connection. I'm still going to be there for her and I will still drop anything if she needs me to fly wherever she's going to school. So that's not going to change. So what had to change? I had to change where I was working. So it's not always going to be a great fit. You're not always going to find people. But I think if you do find an environment where you have other parents, if you explain, if they can see your track record and you can say, look, I have all these transferable skills and I will work really hard, but I also need to make sure that I'm putting my values first, then, that's a better place to lead from. Just really being authentic and upfront from the beginning helps smooth so many other things. So then people do understand. And I know there's probably a lot of places where you can't have that flexibility, but as entrepreneurs, business owners and business leaders, that's what I want to have. And that's what I would want for any team member that would join me. I want to make sure that I'm showing up and helping me. We're meeting in the middle. It's not just about what I need to achieve. And because if I'm helping other people achieve their dreams and their goals, then I'm a better leader and it's going to help them grow and it's going to help them feel more connected to the mission of what we're doing. So I know those weren't any tactical things, but I hope that answered your question a little bit.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a perfect answer because cultural fits and alignment and, like you're saying, values and everything ties so much into leadership. And just because somebody doesn't fit one place doesn't necessarily make those people bad, one side or the other. It's just some groups work better together, and we get that choice. So I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with all the different experiences you've had, tell us what you've learned about leadership along the way and maybe some lessons you've learned.
Oh gosh. Well, the number one lesson I learned, actually the number two of the top lessons I could say I've learned are, even if you can do something, it doesn't mean you need to, right? I used to be the person who, even if I was the leader or supposed to be the leader, I would raise my hand. Oh, I can help with that. I can help with that. Oh, I have a resource. I know somebody, because I do know a lot of people and I've learned a lot of different things because I haven't had a linear career. But that doesn't mean that you have to do everything, because number one, you're not going to do it. and you're going to drop some balls. Number two, you're taking away somebody else's experience to be a manager, to be a leader, and to learn and grow. So that was one of the biggest lessons I had to learn, was to go, it's not about me. It's not about my ego and that I can do something, right? It's like, I need to be humble, and I need to realize this is not just my journey, that a lot of other people are part of this journey. And just because they do something, and it might not be the exact way that you would do it, as long as you have the same goal in mind and you get there, and not a lot of other things happen along the way that derail what you're doing, whether in volunteer work or in the normal business world, right? That's a really important thing too, because like, everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own way of doing things, and you have to respect that. The other thing I learned was, there was a situation where there probably 2/3 or a higher majority of people wanted to implement certain things in a company, and the other people were not quite there. And I was going to be taking over as leader the following year. And I could have pushed through these changes that were part of a strategic plan. They've been talked about, I thought, to death. But a lot of other people were still really unsure about these big changes we were going to make to our organizational structure. So I had to really sit back and go, you know what, let's wait a year, because it was causing a lot of strife with me and the person who was the leader above me. And we just had to say, you know what, let's table this. Let's have a great rest of the year. Let's table this until next year, and we'll bring it back up again, and we'll make sure everybody's questions are answered. Because I think that was large part of the problem. Even though in my mind it had been talked about a lot, not everybody felt included in those conversations. So we did have to make sure more people were included. And that way everybody had a great comfort level. This could be voted on with more authority, right? And changes could be made to the organizational structure in a way that really brought people along. And that was really hard for me, because I'm just used to having an idea and just moving forward. And then kind of, it might be my ADHD, it might be my entrepreneurship, but I'm used to saying, okay, let's go for it. And then if we need to course correct, we do that later. I'm not usually the person who's very cautious and is going to investigate every single, uncover every stone and rock before I jump in. And so that was another really big lesson that I had to learn.
Was that example in a nonprofit, or was that in?
That was a nonprofit example.
Okay.
But it was, it took many, many years, 2 strategic plans for this to even come to a conversation. It took another year for it to come to a vote, and it took probably 3 more years to implement. So it was not a small change.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get people on board with that when it was time?
What it was really funny is that the next year, the person who was in charge the year before was one of the biggest advocates. She just needed a little more information, just like the other volunteers. And this isn't an all women's organization as well. I don't know if that has, says one thing or another, but we really had to just make sure everybody felt comfortable. And there were times that I had people who were mentors in that organization and in others that they did a great job and they really mentored me until they got to a certain point. And then for some reason, the communication broke down. Maybe they didn't realize those same lessons, or they didn't take the lessons they needed to before they stepped into the senior leadership role. And I don't think by any means learning those 2 lessons means that I'm done. I think we're always on a journey. The other thing I'll say is that I really learned more how to be a servant leader. So how do I serve not just the people who are our customers or clients, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, but also my team, the overall community, to make sure that they're really getting the experience that they should be getting out of this too. That's really important to me.
Yeah.
One thing I want to just touch on and make sure our listener picked up on in that, and it took me back to my college days. I actually took a course on leading volunteers. And so it started resonating with me in that it's a little more delicate, or a lot more delicate, I should say, because you're not necessarily transacting with people and they don't feel the need to be there. It's complete choice. And so if they're not on board, it's just like, okay, I'll go do something else. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to do that. So kudos to you for being able to navigate a major change like that, because it's not simple.
Thank you.
Well, and you didn't say this specifically, but I kind of feel like what I heard was just how important communication is as a part of leadership, and how probably communicating the right vision and message the organization was maybe what was lacking at first, and that had to be done.
Yeah, 100%. And I will say that doesn't always mean you get it right. I'm thinking
Right.
back to during the pandemic, I accidentally started a public relations firm because I kept getting clients.
Accidentally.
When I moved back to LA, I knew I had to prove myself. So I didn't charge people a lot, but it's like, I'm just going to, get a couple clients, and then I'm going to grow, and then I'm going to charge more. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happened and I kept getting client referrals. So I had to start hiring people, and we were all over the country. And I had a team that was all women, mostly just graduated with their master's or their undergrad. So a team I could train up. We had a couple senior people, like myself, but we'd have meetings every week to talk through client strategy, who's having an issue or needed help thinking through things. And I also would give updates. I was very transparent with waiting for this client to pay, because again, it was something that just kind of, it fell into my lap, and I didn't have 6 months of savings and all the things that you usually think about when you are starting to have employees, right? And maybe offer them benefits. And I definitely, I would not pay myself or pay myself as much, so I could make sure they were paid properly. But I also would just be really, really transparent with where we were, what was going on. And then I ended up merging, it was really more of an aqua-hire with another agency that I thought was the right fit based on the values that they told me, that the many, many meetings we had. And I thought this would be a great place for my team as well, because it would offer them a little more stability than I could offer. Because if you're a very small business and 2 clients don't pay their bills, you can be done pretty quickly. And that was kind of the situation I was in. I was like, I can try to keep this together. I'll have to lay people off, or we can move to this other company. What happened was the company really wasn't, it was a lot different. Most of my team left and luckily found other jobs that were a good fit for them. But most of my clients left too, because it wasn't the right fit for them. And so I learned a big lesson. Just if the lessons keep on coming, doesn't matter where you are. And I had to learn another lesson of this is, I thought I was leading them to a better place. Ultimately, it might have been. I still have one team member who works at that other agency, and she's been flourishing. Everybody else kind of figured out where they wanted to be, right? A few of them I kept working with. Another one I left at another agency. And I still talk to all of them, right? So I feel like I try to do my best. I also showed them my failures, and I think that's also an important part of the journey. Is it's not always about being the strong person at the front of the room, because then it doesn't show your whole self.
I know, just listening to you right there, I've learned that sometimes as leaders, we feel ultimately responsible, especially when we decide to make a change and we feel like we're doing what's best for the group. And at the end of the day, we still have to make choices for us as individuals and our families and our paths. And not to sound harsh, but those people even underneath us, hopefully as leaders, we've taught them enough to have the strength and the ability to go get those other jobs and to flourish. Because at the end of the day, it's their choice on where they want to be and the fit that they like and what culture they like and who they want to work with, whether that's a business or a client. And so, I've experienced a fair amount of that, and it's a tough one.
Well, tell us. You kind of mentioned that you were very transparent with where things were. Like how do you feel like being authentic, being transparent, like how that's an important part of leadership, and it sounds like that's an important thing to you.
Yeah, for me, it's important because, as you mentioned, I've worked in branding, marketing, public relations, social media strategy. I've, worked with full campaigns where you do everything from the research to the marketing campaigns, A/B testing, to then, passing it on to the lead gen teams and working with them. It always goes back to brand for me, whether it's your personal brand or your business brand. I think they're very intertwined. And I always want to show up as myself. I always make sure I'm making decisions from my own value base, who I want to work with, how I want to work. And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And that's okay. You just admit it and you walk away. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I know that there are a lot of other types of leaders out there as well who have different viewpoints on this. But for me, a lot of people also call me, kind of like the mama bear. Like even for my grad students, some of whom are older than me, I'm always very nurturing in class. I only get a finite amount of time with them every week, kind of like having my daughter at home. I get these 18 years with her before she goes off into the world. So I want to make sure I'm giving them all the tools that they need, whether it's people that they meet. I might not be the teacher that's going to give them the best grade. I might not be the teacher the professor who they like the most, but I'm hoping that at least they can take away something from what I teach them, because that's part of who I am and that's how I want to show up for them. Right. So I think it really goes back to that, and just making sure that it always goes back to our own brand, our own mission, vision, values, our purpose here on earth, the values that we hold dear and that we're showing up. And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean they have to be the same. But if you can at least come from a respectful angle with each other, then that's where magic can really happen.
I like that. Do you feel there's a relationship between branding and leadership?
Absolutely. It was funny when we would get clients in the PR firm. A lot of times they would say, great, I have a website, I have social media, I have a name, this is what we're going to do. Okay, but what's your brand? Who are your customers? What do you really, you're saying this, but is this really what you mean? And so I'd always take them back through branding exercises. And I think out of that, it 100% has to do with how you show up as a company, leadership individually or as a whole, right? And so really having a clear understanding of all of those different components, the purpose, mission, vision, values, positioning statement, what you're actually doing, not the tactics, not necessarily the strategies, not the little things like if you have a beauty brand, the ingredients you're using, right? But what is the benefit? Like making sure that we're really serving our customer or our client. And that to me is another way of showing leadership. It's not something people probably think about, but I think it's really important, because the more that you show up as yourself, whether again, brand or person, and you have somebody who says, okay, I want to purchase from you, and you keep showing up the same way, they're going to be a client, a customer for life, right? And that is a way to show others how then they can use their brand to get people into their door that want to work with them forever. And I still keep in touch. I have tons of people I keep in touch with from the days when I had my PR firm. I still give advice to or help them connect with whoever else they need to. When I lived in Houston, I was more on the philanthropy and kind of social side of things. I chaired a lot of luncheons and galas, and I started a couple nonprofits, and I did all that stuff. And I have people who I work with today from that time in my life. And I wasn't even focused on the branding, marketing, PR agency stuff at that time. I didn't have a podcast, right? I wasn't teaching grad school. I wasn't doing all the same things, but I'm still the same person underneath. Just the things I'm doing to show that or help people or learn and teach are different.
Yeah.
Circling back just a little bit, what have you learned? Obviously, transparency is a good thing, but as a business owner, leader, like how did you navigate that line of what's too much or what's not necessarily beneficial to share?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've always been in the small business realm. A lot of times I've been a solopreneur. I've had real estate development. I've had a whole bunch of different, side hustles when I was a stay-at-home mom, just to also keep busy because I wasn't good at just doing the one thing. I think there are probably times when I've been overly transparent. I mean, with the PR firm, I think it was a good and a bad thing. it made people feel very comfortable talking to me about what was going on in their lives, but maybe sometimes too comfortable, right? Too comfortable taking, of course, it was also the pandemic. So if somebody needed to take some time off for mental health, that was great. And at first I was like, yes, we'll hold your job. And then I had to start thinking like, but is there really a job for this person? Or how do I approach that when they are able to come back? Right. Because I also have to think about the client fit, and I had to think about like their growth in my company, and if this was really the right place for them and for me, for me to have them. And so I had to learn a lot of lessons, and I think that still happens every day. I mean, now I work at a nonprofit foundation as well, and we have, there's a lot of transparency that needs to happen. We need to let people know how much money we're giving in scholarships, what we're doing with their donations. We also are kind of in a phase where we are restarting after over 20 years, because we spent a few years starting a private school. And so time was not as focused on what the foundation was doing as getting the school up and running, getting the right teachers, getting all the students, and, all of that. And now that's running really well. So now the attention's focused back, which is where I come into the foundation of like, I just rewrote the bylaws. I'm rewriting all the stuff so that we can have a board meeting and say, here's where we're at now, as opposed to where we were when you started with us. And so, because I want to be able to make sure that if somebody looks up our information, that they're seeing the right message, they're seeing that they're getting the most up-to-date 990, that they know their money is going exactly where we say it's going to go and where they want it to go. And so, that's a place where I see transparency being really important. They don't need to know all the minutia going on inside, right? Who's doing what, how much money we're spending on whatever software program, all of that stuff. But they need to know that the impact that we're making is real.
Yeah, could you share a little bit about that nonprofit and what you do or what the organization does?
Sure. The ICL Foundation, it's Institute for Civic Leadership, but we are rebranding a little bit right now. As I just started a few months ago, actually less than 4 months ago, as the philanthropy manager, to kind of give a test to see if it was the right fit for both of us. And then I'm moving into the executive director role. So as you can probably tell from that statement, it's a very small organization, tight. We don't spend a lot of money on salaries. We have the school side of things, which is where I get a lot of support for the team members. So essentially, we have this online school, the ICL Academy. It's ranked in the top 5 online private schools in the United States now, in just like 5 or 6 years, because we saw a need for high-performing students who had a passion: tennis, baseball, basketball, skiing, ice skating, singing, performing, art, whatever it is. Or maybe they had a family that was traveling a lot for their parents' jobs. They couldn't attend regular school because they needed to spend time focused on their practice. And so we created this school so that they would have a place to go where they would actually have teachers still, but it would work around their schedule. Quite frankly, we charge a lot less than most private schools and even online private schools, but we have synchronous teaching and then asynchronous homework. We have a lot of workshops. So on the foundation side, my job is to raise money for scholarships. This school year, we gave about $3.4 million in scholarships to our students, because just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have the financial means to actually pursue it, or that your family can pay for all this, right?
Yeah.
So we recognize that we need to help. We have helped kids we just had one student who was the only 12 and under tennis player from the United States to be invited to the series of tournaments in France. Very last minute. I think he's actually there right now as we're recording. So his parents came and said, hey, we need a little scholarship. So we said, okay, we can pay this much if you can get the rest. Great. Grandparents matched what we gave, and then they said we can come up with the rest, not a problem. But they needed that little starter bit of money. Mm-hmm. We had another student who, tennis again, couldn't get to France for the junior champions, at Roland Garros. She won, but she wouldn't have been there unless we had helped pay for that. So we see the greatness in students, but more than on the field, we also want to make sure they're excelling in the classroom, that they have all the same opportunities. They have AP, honors, They have, everything there. We have NCAA curriculum staff to make sure everything will match. We have great college counselors. But the third layer is that civic leadership component. You're not just going to be great on the court or in the classroom, but off the court. So how are you giving back to your community? So every student who has a scholarship is required to do a service project. One student over Christmas break did a tennis tournament to raise money for mental health awareness. Another one lives in an area where there's not arts education. So she's doing workshops with kids to teach them production skills. And then all the money that people pay for the workshops, which are discounted, goes into the production, and the kids put on a full production at the end. So they know how to do lighting, stage, costuming, acting, camera work, sound, all the different components. So she's giving them a creative outlet in the community. And there are so many other examples, but those are just two off the top of my head, because that's really, ultimately, most of these kids are probably not going to be professional athletes, right? That gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you go from being young into college and then post-college. But they can be really great stewards and citizens of the world. They can be those servant leaders. They can know exactly how to be leaders in their local communities. And that's really what it's all about.
I just love the thought of all the different opportunities that I heard as you were talking about all that. I mean, everything from the sports to the educational. That's such a cool program.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm
That's
really
amazing.
excited. It's a perfect mix of like my love for education, for helping kids, and then a little bit of AI and nonprofit world and all of that. Because I did forget to mention our champion mentors, which are Olympians, high performing athletes, singers, who then give workshops to our students. And so I'm working on a little AI project to take that information, be able to give it to more students, because it's not just about our students. Ultimately, for the foundation, we want to help other kids as well. Kids who might not have be able to go to our school, but they still should have access to the same information. They should still have leadership training. They should still have all these great things.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that idea you've talked about several times too, about just servant leadership. And it seems like you've been attracted to the nonprofit world, and it's really important to you to serve and to give back. And yeah, it's powerful to hear what you're doing for those youth and those kids. That's awesome.
Thank you.
How would you and one thing, well, let me back up before I ask this. So I've also noticed as you've talked, I don't know if you've said this word, but it seems like alignment is a big is an important part of what you've done. One, personally, professionally, making sure the work you do lines up with your life and your family. And then it was interesting to also, as you tell that story about these youth, it's like we've kind of gotten away from the 9-to-5 job. It sounds like this is like getting away from 8-to-3 school, right? Kind of a different way of doing that. But what do you see as like the connection between the importance of a leader and the alignment inside of the organization, like making sure the right people are in alignment with that message or with what the organization is trying to achieve?
Oh, that's a really powerful word. So I thank you for seeing that through line, because I did not say that word, I don't think. Alignment, really important. I know that doesn't matter how much a job pays, right? Or how much money I can make just with my consulting clients. It has to be in alignment. I can't work with people who don't see that same vision. And it's the same thing at this organization. Everybody is there because they really love the work we're doing. And it's not just about saying that, right? It's not lip service, it's about the action that you take. And you have to actually show up for the students, you have to show up for each other. We have great meetings every week where we call it the weekly huddle. We share pictures from our lives. So we're really sharing who we are on the outside of work. And I think that's really important too. I want to know who somebody is as a whole being. It helps me relate to them better. It helps them relate to me better. We've all seen examples, I'm sure, where people talk a good game, but they don't actually bring the game to the table. So I always prefer, and that's, part of, I also recognize, because my my world of work has been all over the place, that it's not necessarily easy for somebody to connect those dots. And a lot of times I've been very fortunate that the people who did see alignment in everything I was doing, they really saw it, right? And then they offered me these opportunities. So I do think that's really important. And I don't think it's something you necessarily start out with. You might see something in somebody who you want to hire. They might have some alignment, right? But you see something in them that can grow, and then it builds. And that's one of the most beautiful things, I think, when you're talking about students or you're talking about people you're working with and hiring, is that they can grow into who they truly are. And hopefully they're aligned. And if they're not, then at least you've had a great journey, however long that has been together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what advice would you give if we have a listener that's new to leadership? Maybe they've started their first business, or they're being put into their first management or leadership role in a company. What advice would you give to somebody who's new to leadership and trying to figure it out?
Listen to this podcast. Listen to Everyday Leader. First, we've got to give you a little plug.
Awesome.
And, think about, find mentors, 100%. I think mentors, and coaches, but mentors first, people you can talk to, brainstorm, people who've been where you are and where you want to go. Recognize the difference between management and leadership. Read about that. Understand they're very different. You can be really good at one and not good at the other, and they require different skill sets. And just think about how you want to show up. Think about your brand, how you want to show up every day for yourself and for your team. Because if you think about that, you won't ever be ashamed of how you act. You won't yell at somebody at work because of something else that's going on in your life. You'll be able to take a step back and breathe and really think through, what's the right next step? What action do we need to take? And bring people with you, right? Make sure that you're really explaining what your mission, vision, your values are as a company, as an organization. Workshop that and make sure that people see it for themselves too.
Love that. Last question, and that's how would you like to be remembered?
Oh,
As a leader.
yeah. I would like to be remembered as somebody who always came with kindness and empathy and encouragement. I want to be remembered as a leader who was willing to say when she was wrong, right? Admit mistakes, talk about the tough times, so that other people can hopefully see themselves and be inspired.
You mean the leader's not always right?
No, not at all.
I like that.
Is that answer built into your brand?
100%. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Everything I do pretty much is about how do I help amplify other people around me? Because that really is the truest joy is, I feel it makes me feel really at home. It makes me feel really at peace with who I am and how I show up, is how do I make sure I'm leaving things better? I'm not saying negative things about my journey, whatever other people's journeys are, but let's start with today. What lessons do we learn and how do we move forward better, brighter? And how do I help that person see who they are and get to that point where they feel so inspired and so excited about who they are that they can help influence that next person?
I love it.
Awesome. Well, I guess if any of our listeners want to get connected with you, I know you share. We'll share your social links. But what is the best way to reach out to you if someone wants to hear more about what you do or be connected with you?
LinkedIn is always going to be the best. Email, I have so many email addresses for everything I do, and honestly, a lot of times emails get lost because I'm checking one thing and another, and I have to prioritize based on what my jobs are at that day, right? So LinkedIn is a great way to connect. Don't just do a follow, actually send a connection request if you can, send a message at the very least, because then I do check it, and sometimes those get lost, but not as much as the chances are in email. So I'd say do that, and then you can kind of see a little bit more about other stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, and then I think you also have a a pre-launch for podcast coaching and consulting too?
Yes, that is launching in the next couple weeks. So
Cool.
the number one question people ask me is, about podcasting, probably that followed by nonprofit stuff. But I started my main podcast, Go Brand Amplified, as kind of a side to my business because I'd done other people, clients' podcasts. I'd produced them, done all the interviews, hosted, and I didn't see them using them as full marketing tools and funnels. So I started my own, and now it's been 5.5 years, and I'm rated in Apple charts in 10 countries, and I have over 100,000 listeners a month. But more than that, I've done it myself. I wasn't backed by anybody. I've had to learn this journey. So I really want to help teach people how to do it, no matter what your budget is, how to do it successfully and for the long haul. Because this is not a short journey. It's not something you're going to make tons of money. Most people, at least, won't make money, like tons of money to replace everything else they're doing on day one.
Right.
But you have to be really consistent. You have to show up. You have to be authentic. And that's what continues to engage an audience. And so I want to show people the systems I've set up to make it a lot easier, and all the things that I do. And then they can take from that. They can also do their own, but I would just really want to be there as a support.
That's awesome.
So.
Go follow Your Brand Amplified.
Thank you.
And you can hear her podcast there. Okay, so actually I lied. One last question we like to ask. Any books or podcasts around leadership you'd recommend out there?
Oh gosh, I did not actually. This is one question I didn't look at or think about.
That's okay.
But yeah, beyond yours, there is another podcast called Leaders Who Care that I really love. And it's not just leaders from the business world, but they've actually started interviewing students, some from my academy, but also to learn about young leaders and what they see and what they're seeing in the world. And so that one is a really good one that I love listening to. I probably do more podcast listening than book reading at the moment. There are tons of really good books on leadership, but I'll just stop with that.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this conversation, and always am inspired by just wonderful leaders, and it's obvious that you're having a real impact on who I don't even know, like a ton of people through the students and the nonprofit, and the different careers you've had. I love it. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and thank you for the service that you're giving. Really, this is the topic. I don't think a lot of people think about everyday leaders. We think about celebrities or politicians, but this is really the heart, right, of all small businesses and of where we need to be. So,
yeah. Well, and we truly believe, not even just in business and governmental, like everyone has the opportunity to be a leader at some point throughout every day. And so that's what we're here to try to inspire people to do, lean into it. So
amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for your message and what you shared today. And to our listener, today is the day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.